Hello class, today we're going to start off discussing our Unit 1D notes on energy flow, continuing the unit of the living world. We'll be discussing primary productivity, trophic levels, the 10% rule, and energy flow. To begin with, we'll be focusing on energy systems we see in our ecosystems and a little bit of review from biology. So photosynthesis is the first one, and cellular respiration is the second one. When we talk about inputs and outputs of matter that's needed to create this energy, we need sunlight, obviously, as an input for photosynthesis. We also need carbon dioxide and water. Our outputs are glucose and oxygen. Consequently, those outputs then become inputs of cellular respiration. And then we see that how this cycle continues, right? Glucose goes in, cellular respiration. Oxygen goes into cellular respiration, and we put out CO2, which then becomes our input over here. Water, which becomes our input over here. So we see how this is an essential cycle into creating energy in our ecosystems. The next major term that you're going to hear a whole lot from here on out through the year is productivity. The term productivity is simply really referring to the energy harnessed in an ecosystem, but there are many different types of productivity that we'll be discussing. The first is going to be primary productivity, which is the rate at which sunlight is converted into organic compounds or sugars through photosynthesis. Essentially, in plants, it's the energy harnessed in an ecosystem in our plants through photosynthesis. Secondary productivity is going to be the one that we discuss with animals. So secondary is our animals. This is the same concept as the rate at which we can convert food into biomass, essentially is stored right inside this caterpillar. So it's got to eat food, it can't do photosynthesis. So now it has to create biomass within itself, grow and develop, and store some of that energy as tissue in its cells there. So the one thing this diagram shows you is that they don't get to keep all the energy that they make, and that's where the net productivity comes in, and we'll be discussing that on the next slide here. So looking at ecosystem productivity, we have gross productivity and net productivity. We have a little diagram here to draw for our draw it functions as we move through. Essentially, gross primary productivity is the energy that's actually used by the plants first. So we have 98% of sunlight energy approximately goes somewhere else, either absorbed or reflected into other parts of our ecosystem, whether it's oceans or bouncing off the leaves of the plant itself. But approximately 2% actually goes to the plant and is used, and that would be our GPP, what the plant is taking in for photosynthesis. So most sunlight energy isn't used for photosynthesis. Now, after the plant takes that in, it's got to use some of that energy for growth and development, reproduction, all these other things that they need to do to survive. And in doing so, about 60% of plant energy is given off as respiratory loss. So this is what we would refer to as our NPP. It gets to keep about 40%, net primary productivity. What does it net? What does it get to keep? All right, so that's what's stored inside the plant itself. And that becomes available for consumers to eat. All right. So again, net primary productivity, energy stored within the plants after respiratory loss. Now we get to this concept of gross secondary productivity. What's available for organisms to eat? We have this little caveat here, though. Just because they put all this food into their mouth doesn't mean they actually use it all to create energy. So there's fecal loss in animals. It's something animals do that plants don't do. So we have to really take in the food they eat minus fecal loss, and that is our gross secondary productivity, what's stored inside this caterpillar. Animals, just like plants, have respiratory loss. They have to grow and develop and use that energy they create to form tissues and do metabolic processes inside their bodies. Because of that, we want to know what's actually kept inside here for net secondary productivity. That would be what's stored inside the caterpillar, but after respiratory loss. So we have to subtract respiration. So a little opportunity to apply this concept here is an energy flow diagram. Typical units of energy flow diagram are in kilocalories per meter squared per year. Basically what we're looking at is sunlight coming in, so just like food webs didn't really have sunlight, energy flow diagrams are going to have sun coming in. First thing we can do is talk about efficiency of photosynthesis here. So we have this much energy coming in, this is our total sunlight energy, and how much is the plant actually using is right here. It's gross productivity in blue and net in this pink color. So gross productivity, all right, how much are they using? Right here. So the first thing is efficiency. So if I have my efficiency math here, you're going to get a little bit of math worked out. I'm going to go ahead and talk about how to do that. So we take the gross productivity, which is the 20,810, and we can divide that by the total amount of sun's energy, so 1,700,000 kilocalories. Okay, so you can divide that out, multiply by 100, and we're going to get, sorry, this was our percent efficiency of photosynthesis. In doing that, we should end up with approximately, rounded out, 1.2% when we do that math. Okay, so about 1 to 2% of the sun's energy is used in photosynthesis. That's what we see here, and that's our math to kind of back that up. From there, we're going to go ahead and change the color, and we're going to talk about the next step. So GPP, this is our, let's label that, this is GPP, gross primary productivity. Now we want to figure out net primary productivity. So we have to take the gross minus respiration, which is right over here, to get the net. So in order to do that, I would take my 20,810 minus 13,192, and that should give me 7,618 kilojoules there. Okay, and that's where this number came from. So net primary productivity, what's stored within the plant after it's done all its growth and metabolic functions it needs to do. Now, you would think all that would be available at the next level, but not all of it is. Some of it is through death and decay, decomposition, and that goes out on the blue line, which is going to be these decomposers all the way. So if you follow this all the way down, goes to decomposers. All right, every single one of these lines that goes this way, it would be nice if there were arrows here, but they all go out to decomposers. So we need to subtract that away. So 7,618 minus 4,250 will give us 3,048. All right, and the 3,048 here is representing of our gross productivity. One thing we forgot to discuss here was this, and that's where the 3,048 comes from. So in order to do this, to figure out this number here, and this is going to be our GSP, gross secondary productivity, we have to subtract out any loss from death. So in this case, the GSP is going to be the energy that was there, 7,618, minus 4,250. All right, so that's the loss. And then remember, it's GSP, so we have to do the fecal loss too, which is right here, which is 320. So remember, GSP is what they take in, so the energy they take in minus fecal loss, and that should give us the 3,048. All right, to figure out the next step, which is the net secondary productivity of the first consumer, we have to take the GSP answer minus R. So now I got to subtract out respiration. So I had this for my answer. Now I can just take 3,048 for the gross and subtract respiration out of there, 2,265, and that should leave us with what we had in the box there, 783 for the net. All right. Moving on to the next step, we would repeat the same procedure. again, we have to subtract death out of here, and then we have to subtract the fecal loss out of there to end up with our our GSP for the second level of consumer. Really important right here is the 10% rule. All right, this is going to come up a lot. In general, 10% of energy moves from one trophic level to the next. All right, we lose a lot of energy. You'll see these numbers start big and get small really quick because a lot of the energy is given off as heat or respiratory loss, which we see on the red lines here. All right, so the 10% rule is going to be a really, really critical piece of information, understanding how to estimate energy and biomass at different trophic levels. One thing we're going to take a minute and talk about is biome productivity. So now we kind of discussed productivity, how it works. We'll tie this in with our biomes. All right. Remember, typical units of measure, again, kilocalories per meter squared per year. We talk about high productivity biomes in the terrestrial group. The rainforest, by far and away, we've discussed, is going to be the highest biome productivity due to its lack of a lot of limiting resources and its ability to be efficient with photosynthesis and have lots of water and sunlight available. Extreme deserts, desert biomes, obviously, are the opposite of a rainforest. They're limited in a lot of water and prevents them from being super productive. Aquatic biomes in blue, high productivity, estuaries and reefs. Sunlight, water, and a lot of nutrients flow downstream into estuaries to allow them to be very productive and do a lot of photosynthesis efficiently. Open ocean, per meter squared, is not very productive. We usually just have the phytoplankton and algae as our producers in the open ocean. So remember, per square meter, not very productive, not a lot of photosynthesis going on. However, what is the most total biomass? Most total biomass is our open ocean, because remember, 70% of our planet is ocean, essentially, and that allows for a lot of photosynthesis to go on, but per square meter, it's low. Ecological pyramids are another way to show productivity in ecosystems. There are three different types. We have energy, biomass, and numbers. So we'll go into that. Basically, they set up trophic levels for you to be able to help express those laws of thermodynamics and the 10% rule more clearly. Most of the time, we see a decrease in the number of organisms from bottom to top, so they're getting smaller and they take a pyramid shape. Energy always shows us that. Biomass will always show us that. So we have 100% of energy numbers, biomass, and we go to 10, and then we go to 1%, and then 0.1%, following our 10% rule. So each time 10% is passed on and 90% of the energy is used or released as heat. Here's some example of ecological pyramids. I think there should be three types here. This is all biomass first. What I want to highlight to you with the pyramid of biomass is that we have usually a larger bottom, and then we narrow down into pyramid shape at the top. It's not always perfect like this one, but you'll see that you have most of your biomass in your producer level, with the exception of some aquatic ecosystems where we have like phytoplankton as a lower biomass for the reasons we discussed earlier, and then zooplankton is a little larger biomass at the top. But typically you see this setup. Aquatic ecosystems can be a little different. Pyramid of numbers can be inverted too, just like this English Channel example. If you have your producer level, because this is just counting them, so we've went into an ecosystem and counted everything, you might have trees. Now the pyramid of biomass here might have a huge base because trees are big and heavy, but we really don't have that many of them. They're just big trees. So we have like 200 trees here, and then obviously a lot of insects. So this can make it kind of an inverted pyramid with a small base. But typically you see something like this, or a lot of grass plants, and then we narrow it down as we move up because of limited amounts of energy and that 10% rules application. Same thing here for pyramid of energy. We'll always see this. We won't really see inversions in energy because this is energy now. We have to follow our 10% rule, and we know that there's just going to be a decrease of energy. Approximately 90% is given off as heat, and 10% can pass every level up. and that's what we always see. So there's no inversion exception for that. Individuals, pyramid of numbers, we can see weird stuff at the bottom. And again, biomass, we can see weird stuff at the bottom, but energy is always going to look like this.